Beneath the blazing sun of the Baker Valley, the ruins of Baalbek rise with a quiet, almost imperious presence. From above, the enormity of the site becomes apparent. The foundations stretch across the plain like a statement from a civilization that measured itself not in years, but in centuries, in the weight of stone, in the audacity of human ambition. Here lie the trilithons, 3 stones that defy comprehension. Each one weighs approximately 800 metric tons, a weight so immense that it dwarfs the largest blocks used in Egypt's pyramids or the heaviest stones the Romans ever moved. They are 62 feet long, 14 feet tall, and 12 feet thick, yet they rest with an almost serene precision, set in place nearly 30 feet above the ground, forming the base upon which the Temple of Jupiter would later rise. To stand beside them is to confront a reality that challenges everything we think we know about ancient engineering. The sheer scale is staggering. Imagine a stone nearly 2/3 the length of a basketball court, standing taller than a 3-story building, weighing as much as 300 elephants. And yet, these monoliths were quarried, transported across uneven terrain, and lifted into position with such accuracy that centuries of time have not shifted them from their resting place. Comparisons with other ancient constructions only heighten the mystery. The granite blocks of the Great Pyramid of Giza, themselves a marvel, weigh a fraction of these stones, and the Colosseum in Rome, monumental as it is, relied on smaller, more manageable blocks. The largest Roman stone ever moved, the capital of Trajan's column, weighed just 53 tons. Baalbek's trilithons are 15 times heavier. The stones form the very foundation of the Heliopolis complex, a platform upon which later builders, centuries after the original work, raised the Temple of Jupiter. It is immediately evident that the Romans did not begin this monumental endeavor. The precision of the cutting, the alignment of the blocks, the care taken to place such enormous weights in perfect harmony, all suggest a sophistication that predates the Roman occupation of the region. Archaeologists examining the weathering of the stones note that they bear the scars of a much earlier era, worn and aged in ways that hint at thousands of years before Rome extended its influence into the Levant. The techniques required to move these stones remain a subject of debate. Theories propose rollers, capstans, pulley blocks, or large teams of workers, yet even the most generous calculations strain against the limits of human capability. To lift a stone weighing 800 tons to the height of the foundation would require an engineering ingenuity that, by all conventional measures, should not have existed at the time. The trilithons are not solitary in their grandeur. Surrounding them are other massive blocks, some weighing 350 tons, others exceeding 600, forming platforms and retaining walls that frame the Heliopolis site. Each stone is cut with an astonishing precision, fitted so tightly that mortar would be unnecessary, and aligned in ways that resist the shifting of the earth over millennia. There is an artistry in the work, a combination of engineering and vision that elevates these stones beyond mere construction. They are both functional and symbolic, monuments to power, skill, and perhaps a forgotten understanding of the natural world. Even more remarkable is what lies just beyond the constructed site, within the quarries themselves. Here, massive stones remain unhewn or only partially worked, some larger than any block ever transported to the Temple of Jupiter. The most recent discoveries reveal monoliths exceeding 1,600 tons, dwarfing even the trilithons that form the site's foundation. These stones lie where they were extracted, their presence a silent testament to the ambition of their creators. They suggest a civilization capable of working with the unimaginable, preparing blocks that, for reasons unknown, were never moved, yet reveal an understanding of scale and material that modern engineers struggle to comprehend. The relationship between the trilithons and the Temple of Jupiter underscores the site's layered history. The Romans, known for their architectural mastery and meticulous record-keeping, raised their columns and pediments upon these earlier foundations, enhancing a platform that was already extraordinary. Yet they did not, could not, move the original stones. Their architectural style is evident in the upper structures, but beneath their handiwork lies a mystery older than their empire. The contrast is stark. The Romans relied on proportion, decoration, and smaller stones, while the trilithons embody brute force, managed with unimaginable precision. Standing at Baalbek, one begins to appreciate not just the physical scale, but the philosophical magnitude of the site. It is not merely a question of who could move such stones or how, it is a confrontation with the limits of human imagination and ingenuity. To understand Baalbek is to accept that the people who built it operated with knowledge, techniques, or perhaps even organizational structures that we have lost, that were never recorded, that vanished with time. The very stones themselves whisper the story of a civilization that measured ambition in tons and centuries, that dared to raise monuments that outlast empires. And yet, for all its monumental achievements, the site keeps its deepest secrets in the quarries, in the stones too massive to transport, in the unanswered question of origin. Who first envisioned this platform, this city of stone? How were the trilithons quarried, transported, and placed with such perfect alignment? And why leave stones larger than anything eventually used, as if the plan was never completed or perhaps never meant to be? These questions linger as one surveys the ruins, as the shadows of the massive blocks stretch across the valley, timeless and silent. The trilithons of Baalbek are not simply stones. They are records of a human, or perhaps pre-human, capability that challenges conventional history, a testament to scale, skill, and vision that transcends what we consider possible. They remind us that the past may hold truths far beyond our current understanding, that civilizations rise and vanish, leaving behind fragments of ambition carved in stone. And even as we measure, theorize, and marvel, the largest stones remain in the quarry, untouched and incomprehensible, their purpose, their builders, and their story still unknown. Baalbek calls to those who seek answers, yet it grants none easily. Each step across the platform, each glance up at the towering trilithons, is an encounter with the extraordinary. Here, in the heart of Lebanon, stone and time merge, revealing a history of audacity and mystery, of skill beyond the record of written words, and of human, or perhaps forgotten, ingenuity that continues to astonish millennia later. Just half a mile from the monumental ruins of Baalbek lies a scene that is equally staggering, yet far less known. The quarries from which the colossal stones were extracted stretch across the landscape like a frozen testament to ambition. Here, nature and human will intersect, revealing the scale of work that challenges all conventional understanding of ancient engineering. It is within these quarries that the most extraordinary stones of Baalbek were hewn. Stones so immense that their very existence forces us to question what we think we know about the civilizations that shaped this land. Among the most remarkable discoveries is a monolith recently uncovered, measuring nearly 20 meters in length, 6 meters in width, and 5.5 meters in height. Its weight has been estimated at 1,650 tons, over twice that of the largest trilithon already in place at the Temple of Jupiter. It is a staggering figure, a number so vast that it becomes almost impossible to conceptualize. To move it using any known ancient technique would have been an engineering challenge that stretches the limits of imagination. And yet, this enormous stone remains in situ, partially buried under layers of earth and debris, untouched, its ultimate purpose unknown. It is, quite simply, the new king of megaliths, a stone that eclipses all others in its sheer mass. Nearby lies the stone of the pregnant woman, or Hajar el-Hibla, weighing roughly 1,000 tons. This colossal block, legendary among archaeologists and local folklore alike, sits quietly, dwarfed only by the even more massive 1,650-ton monolith. It is partially quarried, shaped with a precision that mirrors the meticulous work evident in the trilithons, yet it was never transported to the temple complex. Other monoliths, scattered across the quarry, weigh between 600 and 800 tons. All are evidence of an ambition and capability that seem to defy the conventional narrative of human skill at the time. Each stone is hewn with remarkable precision, their edges straight, their surfaces smoothed, their corners sharp. The quarry itself seems designed not merely as a place of extraction, but as a stage upon which feats of extraordinary engineering were performed. The question immediately arises, why leave these stones where they were cut? The Romans, often credited with much of Baalbek's construction, had no precedent for moving anything remotely approaching this scale. Their largest known monoliths, such as the obelisks transported from Egypt to Rome, weighed at most 323 tons, and even those journeys spanned decades, requiring careful planning, enormous manpower, and extraordinary persistence. The trilithons of Baalbek, themselves more than twice as heavy, were transported, but these newly discovered quarry stones were not. Their immobility is not due to accident nor a lack of planning. It seems deliberate, a choice whose reasoning is lost to time. This raises profound questions about the intent and capability of the original builders. Did they possess a technology or methodology now forgotten, one capable of handling immense weights with precision? Were these stones meant to be moved and placed at the temple site, only to be abandoned for reasons we cannot know? Or were they part of an entirely different plan, a vision whose purpose was never fulfilled, or perhaps never meant to be fulfilled in the conventional sense of construction? The very existence of these stones suggests a sophistication that challenges the assumption that the Romans were the sole architects of the monumental platform. The quarries themselves are a silent record of these activities. Deep grooves etched into the bedrock mark the careful separation of these stones from the surrounding rock. The surfaces bear signs of tools, yet these marks are not uniform, and they suggest a combination of techniques that remain difficult to replicate today. Scholars and engineers have attempted to model these methods, proposing systems of levers, pulleys, and wooden rollers, sometimes involving hundreds or even thousands of laborers. Yet when calculations are applied to stones of the 1,000 or 1,650 ton scale, the numbers become untenable. Even the most optimistic projections exceed what is feasible using purely human muscle power. It is not only the weight that astonishes, but also the precision. The stones in the quarry are shaped with an attention to detail that mirrors the construction of the foundation stones at Baalbek. Corners are perfectly squared, faces are finely dressed, and the geometry of the blocks suggests an understanding of stress distribution and load-bearing principles that is extraordinary for any civilization of the period. The surfaces appear deliberately polished, and yet the stones were left where they were, a puzzle that hints at knowledge of engineering far beyond the Roman era. Local folklore adds another layer to the mystery. Generations of inhabitants have told stories of giants, of titanic figures capable of moving stones that would otherwise be impossible to manipulate. The stone of the pregnant woman itself carries a name that evokes human imagination, struggling to grasp the magnitude of what it represents. These legends, while mythological in nature, underscore the awe that the scale of the stones inspired in observers both ancient and modern. There is a sense that the very landscape, carved and shaped by hands long vanished, was intended to leave an impression on those who witnessed it, an impression of power, of capability, and of knowledge that exceeds conventional history. The presence of these colossal stones also challenges conventional timelines. While Roman construction in Baalbek is well documented, there is no historical record of anyone moving stones of this magnitude. The absence of Roman measurements on the megalithic platform and the size of the quarry blocks suggest that the earliest construction predates Roman activity by centuries, possibly millennia. Some scholars, looking at weathering patterns, stratigraphy, and construction style, have suggested that the original builders may have been part of a civilization that has left no other surviving records, a society whose understanding of stone and geometry rivaled, if not exceeded, anything known to the Romans. The spatial relationship between the quarry and the temple complex is equally perplexing. The stones are located mere hundreds of meters from the construction site, yet even this short distance presents enormous logistical challenges. Moving a stone weighing 1,650 tons across flat terrain is incomprehensible with any method known to exist in the ancient world. It is almost as if the stones were placed in the quarry deliberately, their proximity to the temple site symbolic rather than practical, or their movement intended for a later time that never came. The quarries, therefore, are not merely sources of raw material. They are part of the enigma, a silent stage upon which the story of human ambition and capability is written in stone. The size, precision, and immobility of these stones suggest that the question of who built Baalbek may not have a simple answer. The Romans could not have moved them, nor is there evidence that any. Contemporary culture possessed the means to do so. If these stones were intended for the temple, then someone at some time had knowledge and technology that has since vanished. If they were not intended to be moved, then their purpose may lie in something other than construction, something symbolic or ritual, a record of capability itself. Either way, the quarry preserves one of the most profound mysteries of human history. And so, as one stands in the shadow of the largest worked stones ever discovered, the question becomes unavoidable. If the Romans could not move these stones, if no civilization of the known historical record possesses the capacity to manipulate such colossal blocks, then who or what built Baalbek? The answer remains obscured, buried beneath centuries of earth, stone, and the silence of those who carved these monuments, leaving behind a legacy that continues to challenge and astonish every observer who ventures into the Bekaa Valley. Subscribe to our channel if you love our content. Beneath the towering columns of the Temple of Jupiter and hidden beneath the polished stonework admired by generations of visitors lies a foundation of such magnitude and precision that it defies conventional understanding. At first glance, Baalbek presents itself as a Roman masterpiece, a city of stone in the Bekaa Valley adorned with Corinthian columns, elaborate friezes, and pediments that reflect the imperial architectural language of the empire. Yet closer examination reveals a more complex story, one written not in the decoration of the upper structures, but in the stones beneath, in their size, their cut, and the marks of a civilization whose methods remain mysterious. The first and most imposing layer is the megalithic foundation, dominated by the colossal trilithons. Each stone stretches over 60 feet in length, rises 14 feet above the bedrock, and measures 12 feet in thickness, with weights that challenge comprehension. These stones were cut with a precision that allows them to fit together almost seamlessly, despite their immense mass. The surfaces are smooth, the angles precise, and the blocks aligned with a geometry that suggests not only aesthetic intention, but deep structural understanding. The stones themselves rest on an earlier platform of 24 blocks weighing approximately 350 tons each, forming a base so stable and exact that it has survived thousands of years of earthquakes and erosion. The wear and weathering on these megaliths indicate exposure for centuries, long before Roman hands graced the site. Above this monumental foundation sits an intermediate layer of stonework. Here, smaller blocks appear, their construction less imposing but still remarkably precise. The cutting techniques differ noticeably from those of the megalithic base. Edges are less sharp, surfaces show a different pattern of tool marks, and the joints suggest an evolving understanding of stone placement. The differences in workmanship create a visible contrast between the immense precision of the foundation and the more conventional methods applied in this middle layer. Scholars have debated the origins of this intermediate stonework, noting that it may represent a transitional phase in construction, bridging the prehistoric foundation and the later Roman embellishments. The very presence of these layers suggests that Baalbek was not conceived and built in a single era, but rather over centuries, if not millennia, with successive cultures adding, modifying, and enhancing the site according to their capabilities and aesthetic sensibilities. The final layer is unmistakably Roman. The upper terraces of the complex, including the Temple of Jupiter itself, are adorned with the familiar hallmarks of classical architecture: Corinthian columns soaring 65 feet into the sky, decorative friezes depicting mythological motifs, and carefully proportioned pediments that convey a sense of imperial grandeur. The stonework here is smaller, more uniform, and aligned with the measurement systems known to Roman engineers, yet the contrast with the massive megalithic foundation beneath is stark. The Romans built upon a base that they neither designed nor fully understood, repurposing an existing structure of extraordinary scale. The difference in cutting techniques and the absence of Roman measurement standards in the foundation stones strongly suggest that the original builders were not Roman, and that the megalithic platform predates the Roman Empire by centuries, perhaps millennia. The layers of construction at Baalbek are more than just stylistic differences. They are evidence of a profound mystery. The megalithic foundation shows signs of techniques that do not match any known Roman. Methods. Tool marks are inconsistent with the chisels, levers, and lifting devices documented by classical engineers. The joints between stones are so precise that they could not have been achieved with simple trial and error or brute force alone. Even today, modern engineers struggle to reproduce the alignment of stones of such immense size with the level of accuracy seen at Baalbek. The intermediate layers add to the puzzle, suggesting a continuum of knowledge that spans multiple eras, each building upon the work of predecessors whose identities remain unknown. Weathering patterns also tell a story of immense age. The megalithic stones, exposed to the elements for centuries before the Romans arrived, show erosion and mineralization that suggest an origin far older than the empire's construction records allow. In some cases, lichen and mineral deposits indicate that these stones were quarried and positioned long before the Roman architectural features were added. The contrast with the relatively fresh appearance of the Roman columns and decorative elements is striking. It is as if time itself has etched a record into the stone, one that separates the hands of ancient builders from those of classical craftsmen. Archaeological investigations support this layered timeline. Excavations reveal that the underlying platform of megalithic stones is not a mere foundation for Roman decoration, but a carefully engineered base designed to bear extraordinary weight. The upper sections, while impressive, rest upon this prehistoric work. The Romans may have recognized the solidity of the platform and built atop it, yet they left no records indicating that they understood or even acknowledged the original scale and precision of what they inherited. The absence of documentation about the foundation, combined with the enormous size of the trilithons and supporting stones, makes it highly improbable that Roman engineers were responsible for the initial construction. The implications of these layers extend beyond mere architectural curiosity. They suggest a continuity of human ingenuity that spans millennia, a knowledge of stone, geometry, and engineering that may have been lost and rediscovered multiple times. The contrast between the prehistoric foundation, the intermediate stonework, and the Roman additions creates a visual and intellectual puzzle. How did civilizations of differing eras interact with this site, and what knowledge did they inherit, preserve, or fail to comprehend? The stones themselves, silent and enduring, offer no answers, only questions, challenging assumptions about the capabilities of ancient peoples and the progression of technology through time. Beneath the surface, Baalbek reveals the complexity of human ambition. The Romans may have added columns, pediments, and temples, yet the true foundation of their work is something older, something that suggests an era of extraordinary skill and audacity. It is a reminder that monuments are not always the product of a single culture or a single point in time. Instead, they are palimpsests layered with history, each edition preserving traces of the builders who came before. In Baalbek, these layers are physical, monumental, and nearly incomprehensible in scale. Understanding the differences in cutting techniques and jointing between the layers is key to grasping the enigma. The megalithic foundation exhibits a precision that minimizes gaps between stones to fractions of an inch, an exactness that surpasses many modern standards. The intermediate stonework shows more conventional fitting, with mortar or filler occasionally used to compensate for alignment variations. The Roman additions, while architecturally impressive, adhere to standardized measurements and proportion systems, reflecting the empire's emphasis on uniformity and classical aesthetics rather than the audacious scale of the earlier stones. In examining Baalbek through these layers, a startling picture emerges. What we see on the surface, the Temple of Jupiter, the Corinthian columns, the pediments, is only part of the story. Below, hidden from casual observation, lies a foundation that may stretch back 11,000 years, predating not only Rome but the civilizations we typically associate with monumental architecture. It challenges the linear understanding of technological progress and hints at knowledge that has been lost, forgotten, or deliberately concealed. Every layer tells a story, yet the oldest layer tells the story of a civilization that, for reasons unknown, left no written records and no direct trace beyond these immense stones. The stones of Baalbek are not merely large, they are monumental beyond comprehension. To move a block weighing 800 metric tons, or nearly 1,750,000 pounds, over half a mile from its quarry and then lift it 30 feet into place, would challenge even the most advanced modern engineering. Contemporary cranes built with steel, hydraulics, and precise instrumentation struggle to handle loads of that magnitude. Yet the builders of Baalbek, whatever their identity, accomplished such feats using technology that remains elusive, undocumented, and largely speculative. The sheer scale of the endeavor forces us to confront questions that border on the philosophical. How was it possible, and did the methods belong to human hands as we understand them? Scholars have long debated the mechanics behind these constructions. Jean-Pierre Adam, a French engineer and historian, proposed that the movement of massive stones could have been achieved with rollers, capstans, and pulley blocks. His calculations suggest that a block weighing 557 tons could be transported with the coordinated effort of 512 workers. These machines, simple in principle yet demanding in execution, would require precise placement, synchronized effort, and a sophisticated understanding of leverage and friction. The use of wooden rollers, for instance, would necessitate constant maintenance and careful balancing to prevent catastrophic tipping. Capstans, essentially giant windlasses operated by teams of men, could provide the rotational force to pull a massive stone along prepared tracks. Pulleys, mechanical advantages of varying ratios, might allow lifting or incremental adjustments. Adam's analysis is grounded in known ancient techniques and remains one of the most serious attempts to rationalize these monumental efforts. Yet even with such methods, the logistics grow staggeringly complex when applied to the trilithons themselves. These stones exceed Adam's calculations, weighing roughly 800 tons each, nearly 50% heavier than the blocks his model addressed. To achieve the same feat, estimates multiply the workforce dramatically. Some scholars suggest that tens of thousands of men, perhaps 40,000, would have been necessary to transport, position, and elevate these enormous monoliths. Organizing such a workforce is not merely a question of labor. It would require food, coordination, planning, and an understanding of mechanical forces far beyond what is usually attributed to prehistoric or even classical societies. The construction site would become a living organism, every movement carefully orchestrated, every misstep potentially catastrophic. The process of lifting such colossal stones adds another layer of complexity. Even if rollers could move them across flat ground, raising them to their final elevation presents a far greater challenge. Modern cranes equipped with hydraulics and steel cables rated for thousands of tons struggle to lift objects weighing half that of Baalbek's trilithons. For the ancient builders, the lifting process remains speculative. Some theories suggest the use of earthen ramps, inclined planes built with dirt, timber, and stone over which the blocks could be dragged gradually upward. Others propose the construction of temporary scaffolding and mechanical devices to incrementally raise each block, shifting it a few inches at a time while supporting it with timbers and levers. the level of precision required to position a stone of this size, aligning it perfectly with neighboring blocks to form a structurally sound platform, would be monumental. Mistakes could be fatal, crushing men or splitting the very stones intended to form the foundation. Adding to the enigma is the precision of the Baalbek stones themselves. Each trilithon rests almost seamlessly against its neighbor, with tolerances so narrow that even a modern engineer would marvel at the craftsmanship. The foundation platform stretching across the Heliopolis site is engineered to bear immense weight without mortar, relying solely on the fit and stability of the stones. This precision implies not only knowledge of mechanical advantage, but also an understanding of structural stress, weight distribution, and balance that seems far ahead of its time. The builders anticipated centuries of earthquakes, settling and erosion, and yet the stones remain aligned, largely unshifted, despite millennia of natural forces. When we examine the sheer scale of these efforts, it is impossible to ignore the limits of human capability. To coordinate the work of thousands of men, to quarry, transport and elevate stones weighing hundreds of tons each, and to do so with a degree of precision that rivals modern engineering, stretches the boundaries of what is considered plausible. The Roman Empire, often credited with the Temple of Jupiter, offers examples of impressive engineering feats, yet nothing in Roman construction comes close to the scale of Baalbek's trilithons. The largest stones moved by the Romans rarely exceeded 300 tons, and even these projects spanned decades with meticulous planning. The disparity raises difficult questions about the builder's identity, the techniques employed, and the level of sophistication present in this ancient culture. The philosophical implications are equally profound. If the stones could not have been moved by conventional human means, does that imply knowledge or technology lost to history? Or does it suggest that the builders possessed physical and organizational abilities far beyond what we usually attribute to ancient civilizations? Some have suggested that myths of giants, handed down in local folklore, may encode memories of extraordinary human labor, later exaggerated into legends of superhuman strength. Others speculate that there may have been advanced mechanical knowledge, now lost, that allowed the precise movement and placement of stones in ways that modern historians struggle to reconstruct. Baalbek forces us to confront our assumptions about the limits of ancient engineering. It is not merely a question of lifting a stone, it is a question of planning, understanding leverage, calculating stress, coordinating massive workforces, and maintaining precision across an enormous structure. Every aspect of the site, the quarrying of stones, the preparation of the platform, the alignment of blocks, and the finishing of surfaces, demonstrates an understanding of forces and materials that seems extraordinary for the eras typically assigned to its construction. It is an engineering paradox, a feat so immense that conventional explanations strain credulity, yet so real that it stands before us, tangible and enduring. Modern attempts to replicate even portions of the work underline this paradox. Engineers with steel pulleys, powered winches and heavy machinery find that raising an 800-ton block requires extreme caution, precision and redundancy. The task is fraught with risk. Even small miscalculations can result in catastrophic failure. In this context, the achievements at Baalbek take on an almost mythic quality. The ancient builders accomplished with timber, ropes and manpower what we today regard as a monumental challenge, something that stretches the imagination and demands respect for their skill. Some theories push beyond practical engineering into the speculative. Could there have been techniques or technologies that allowed these stones to be moved with less apparent effort? Could vibration, lubrication, or mechanical ingenuity have been employed in ways that leave no archaeological trace? Were these methods known only to a select group of initiates, their knowledge lost over the centuries? Such questions underscore the mystery. Baalbek is not simply an architectural site, it is a record of human, or perhaps more than human, capability preserved in stone. Ultimately, the enigma of Baalbek's construction forces a confrontation with the limits of belief and understanding. Were these feats accomplished by humans using tools we have yet to fully comprehend, by a civilization whose knowledge surpassed its time, or do they hint at something more profound, an intersection of human ambition and ingenuity that we cannot easily classify? The enormity of the stones, the precision of their placement, and the absence of records explaining the methods used all point toward a reality that is simultaneously tangible and enigmatic. The foundations of Baalbek tell a story older than history itself, a story written not in ink but in stone, stretching back into a time long before Rome rose to power. Archaeological evidence at the site reveals human activity that dates at least 11,000 years into the past. Tools, pottery fragments, and remnants of settlements suggest that this high plateau in the Bekaa Valley was not a quiet wilderness in prehistory, but a place of habitation, ritual, and perhaps extraordinary ambition. Long before any Roman engineer arrived, people were present here, shaping the land, moving stones, and constructing forms that would endure for millennia. The megalithic platform itself, composed of the massive trilithons, sits atop 24 enormous stones, each weighing roughly 350 tons. Above them rest the 3 trilithons, each approximately 800 tons. Their sheer scale dwarfs anything the Romans moved elsewhere. The craftsmanship of these foundation stones is precise, their joints cut to fit with a sophistication that surpasses what is typical of Roman masonry. The stones interlock without mortar, their faces polished to near perfection, and the alignment of each block is exact, forming a platform capable of supporting enormous weight with remarkable stability. For centuries, scholars attributed this work to Roman engineers, yet when examined closely, discrepancies begin to emerge. One of the most telling anomalies is the absence of Roman measurement standards. Roman architecture, from temples to aqueducts, is famously consistent, relying on the Roman foot to ensure proportionality and structural coherence. Every arch, column, and foundation stone in Rome itself conforms to this unit of measurement. Yet at Baalbek, no evidence indicates the use of Roman feet in the construction of the foundation platform. The dimensions of the trilithons, the supporting stones and the surrounding masonry, do not correspond to Roman standards. Instead, they reflect a system that is unknown to us, a methodology that existed before the imperial engineers arrived and built their additions. The Temple of Jupiter, with its towering Corinthian columns and decorative friezes, is clearly Roman in style. These upper structures match classical Roman design with familiar proportions, symmetry, and motifs. But the underlying megalithic foundation remains stubbornly different. Its style, scale, and construction techniques are foreign to Roman engineering, suggesting that the Romans were building atop a platform they did not create. They inherited an existing structure, one whose origins were already ancient, and adapted their architecture to fit upon it. Archaeologists have noted weathering patterns that support this sequence. The lower stones show signs of exposure for far longer than the Roman-era constructions above them. Lichen growth, erosion marks, and surface patina indicate centuries, perhaps millennia, of environmental impact. These observations reinforce the idea that the foundation predates Roman occupation by an immense margin, placing the original builders in a prehistoric context. It is a staggering revelation, a site of extraordinary engineering, possibly created by people who lived long before written history, whose methods and purpose remain a mystery. Comparisons with other ancient megalithic sites underscore the uniqueness of Baalbek. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, for example, circular stone enclosures date back over 11,000 years, built by people without metal tools. In Egypt, the earliest pyramids emerged several millennia later, and yet the stones at Baalbek far exceed the size of most early pyramidal blocks. The sheer weight and precision of the trilithons challenge conventional narratives of what prehistoric societies could achieve. Quarrying, transporting, and positioning such massive stones requires not just labor, but knowledge of leverage, force, and alignment that modern engineers would find demanding even with today's technology. The quarrying evidence nearby adds another layer to the puzzle. Stones weighing hundreds or even over 1,000 tons remain in situ, untransported, suggesting that the decision to move certain blocks and not others was deliberate. The largest stone ever discovered, weighing approximately 1,650 tons, lies half a mile from the temple complex, its surface only partially exposed. Nearby, the so-called Stone of the Pregnant Woman weighs around 1,000 tons. These stones, never lifted or relocated, challenge the assumption that the site's creators worked with conventional Roman methods. Even the largest stones the Romans are known to have moved, such as the Laterano obelisk or Pompey's pillar, pale in comparison, weighing less than a quarter of these Baalbek monoliths. The absence of records compounds the mystery. The Romans were meticulous chroniclers, documenting construction projects across the empire with inscriptions, written accounts, and detailed architectural plans. Aqueducts, amphitheaters, and obelisks all bear testament to this bureaucratic rigor. Yet no surviving Roman text mentions the creation of the massive foundation at Baalbek, nor the lifting of trilithons. If the Romans were capable of moving stones of such weight, why does history remain silent about this feat? The silence suggests that they may have discovered the existing platform and chosen to build upon it rather than undertake the construction themselves. Folklore and local tradition provide additional context. Generations of inhabitants, including Arab Muslims, Maronite Christians, and Orthodox Christians, recount legends of giants who once inhabited the region, crafting monumental structures beyond human capability. These stories, passed down orally, resonate with the archaeological record, pointing to a period when extraordinary labor and skill were applied to shape the landscape. While myth cannot replace evidence, it preserves a cultural memory that aligns with the physical reality of Baalbek's megaliths. Scientific dating, while not precise to the exact year of construction, corroborates the prehistoric nature of the foundation. Radiocarbon dating of organic material associated with human presence suggests activity on the site well before Roman settlement. Layers of sediment, tool marks, and the stratification of stonework indicate that the platform existed long before the Romans erected their temples. This realization reframes the site not as a Roman creation, but as a palimpsest of human ingenuity spanning millennia. The architectural sophistication of the platform further underscores its mystery. The trilithons fit so precisely that even modern engineers struggle to replicate the joins without mortar. Each block bears signs of careful planning, with alignment that accounts for weight distribution, stability, and long-term settlement. The precision suggests an understanding of structural engineering principles that predates formalized mathematics and mechanical theory, challenging our assumptions about prehistoric cognition. If the Romans did not build the foundation, then the question becomes unavoidable: who did? The absence of records leaves us with possibilities that range from advanced prehistoric cultures to lost knowledge that has left no trace. The decisions to quarry, move, and place these enormous stones reflect intention, planning, and skill, hinting at a society, or perhaps a succession of societies, capable of feats that exceed conventional explanations. Baalbek stands, therefore, not merely as a site of Roman grandeur, but as a testament to human ambition across deep time. Its megalithic foundation, untouched by conventional measurement systems and predating historical records, invites us to reconsider the narrative of civilization. The stones themselves are witnesses to an unknown past, silent yet eloquent, challenging us to imagine the minds and hands that shaped them, and to acknowledge that history may hold secrets far older and more extraordinary than we have yet comprehended. Subscribe to our channel if you love the content. Long before the first archaeologists set foot on the Baalbek Plateau, the people who lived in the Bekaa Valley had stories to tell. Stories of giants, of beings larger than men, whose hands shaped the stones that no ordinary human could have lifted. These tales passed down through generations speak of a time when the world was different, when extraordinary forces moved through the landscape, leaving monuments that defy imagination. Among these accounts, one of the most intriguing comes from Estefan Dowaihi, the Maronite patriarch of Lebanon. He recounted that the fortress of Baalbek, with its enormous stones, was constructed by giants, beings who existed before the flood, whose strength and knowledge allowed them to shape the mountains themselves. According to his writing, the original builders named the site after Enoch, the son of Cain, and peopled it with these colossal figures who were later punished for their iniquities. The stones, he suggested, were a legacy of a race long vanished, yet their mark on the earth remained undeniable. The Phoenician historian Sanchoniathon, writing around the 12th century BCE, preserved similar accounts, blending myth with what may have been memory. He described a world where gods and demigods walked among men, where divine or semi-divine beings imparted knowledge, built cities, and left records inscribed not in paper, but in stone. In his chronicles, the builders of Heliopolis, the Roman Baalbek, were connected to deities such as Cronus and Thoth, figures associated with wisdom and creation. These legends, strange though they may seem, resonate with the physical evidence on the ground. The trilithons, each weighing 800 tons or more, dwarf human scale in a way that feels almost supernatural. Standing beside one of these stones, a person appears as a child next to a mountain. The measurements themselves seem to demand a workforce beyond ordinary men. Folklore across cultures often preserves fragments of reality, distilled into narrative over time. In the case of Baalbek, the stories of giants and divine builders may reflect an encoded memory of engineering feats that were already ancient when the Romans arrived. Local tradition often speaks of the Nephilim, the mighty men of Genesis, who were the offspring of divine beings and humans. These beings, described as enormous in stature and extraordinary in strength, have parallels in Greek mythology as the Titans and Gigantes, a race that warred against the gods and left monuments of stone. In these overlapping myths, one finds a thematic resonance with Baalbek. A landscape carved by forces far beyond the ordinary, a place where the physical and the mythological intersect. Visualizing the scale of the stones against human beings emphasizes the enigma. Each trilithon is over 60 feet long, 14 feet tall, and 12 feet thick. Standing before one, a single person is lost against its face, a mere fraction of the mass and presence contained within a single block. Even the supporting 350-ton stones seem insurmountable, their sheer bulk suggesting an effort and technique far beyond that of ordinary laborers. Ancient texts hint that the stones themselves were imbued with significance, perhaps serving ritual purposes or acting as markers of power and authority. The myths that survive hint at a consciousness that regarded size as a measure of divine or cosmic importance. Stories passed down through local communities also connect Baalbek to wider mythological frameworks. Sanchoniathon and other chroniclers recount that the original inhabitants were assisted by divine entities who descended from the heavens to teach men arts that would otherwise have been lost. These beings were credited with building temples and cities, moving mountains, and leaving monuments that could withstand the ravages of time. The alignment and precision of the stones, the way they are perfectly fitted without mortar, seems to echo these legends. Such precision is remarkable even today, raising questions about whether these stories preserved a memory of technology or methods that have been lost. The stone of the pregnant woman is another focal point for legend. This massive block, weighing roughly 1,000 tons, sits in the quarry near Baalbek, untouched and unfinished. Local tradition ascribes human qualities to it, calling it pregnant, as if it holds the potential of life or power within its mass. Nearby lies the newly discovered 1,650-ton block, the largest ever found at the site, partially buried and revealing a scale that seems almost incomprehensible. In folklore, these stones are often described as creations of beings with capabilities that exceeded humans, a physical manifestation of myths where the extraordinary was tangible and monumental. The interplay between legend and observation is profound. On the one hand, we have tangible evidence, enormous stones, precise joints, quarry marks, and a construction history that spans millennia. On the other, we have stories of giants, divine builders, and Nephilim, suggesting a cultural memory that encodes the magnitude of these engineering feats. Rather than dismissing these myths as mere fantasy, it is worth considering them as reflections of the awe inspired by structures that were literally beyond comprehension. For the people of ancient Lebanon, the size and precision of these stones could only be accounted for by beings far greater than themselves. Even in modern studies, researchers struggle to explain how these blocks were moved and positioned. Calculations suggest that moving an 800-ton trilithon would require thousands of men, complex systems of rollers, pulleys, or levers, and a level of planning that rivals modern construction projects. Yet the folklore speaks not in mechanics, but in scale, emphasizing the extraordinary nature of the effort and attributing it to beings of mythic strength. Perhaps these legends are the cultural equivalent of an engineering report encoded in narrative and preserved through time. The connection to divine or semi-divine figures also speaks to the symbolic power of Baalbek. By associating the stones with giants or gods, the myths reinforce the impression of a sacred space, a place set apart from ordinary life. The alignment of the site, its imposing presence in the valley, and its enduring stability lend credence to stories of supernatural involvement. The myths may reflect a recognition that such construction required not only physical labor, but knowledge and technique far beyond what was common, preserving an understanding that the creators operated on a scale that approached the impossible. Local traditions also tie Baalbek to broader mythic narratives, connecting the site with stories of the Tower of Babel, of cosmic measurement, and of human ambition reaching toward the divine. In this way, the giants of folklore are not merely symbolic. They are a reflection of the human need to explain structures that transcend conventional understanding. The myth suggests that the builders, whoever they were capable of feats so extraordinary that human memory instinctively transformed them into stories of giants and gods. Through these legends, the scale and mystery of Baalbek are amplified. Each story, each reference to the Nephilim or Titans, underscores the incomprehensible size of the stones and the precision of their placement. The oral history preserves a memory of achievement that predates written records, reminding us that the human imagination has always sought to explain what seems impossible. In this context, folklore and physical evidence converge, suggesting that the tales of giants may be a cultural echo of a real engineering reality long lost to time. The stories leave a haunting question. Could the myths of giants, divine builders, and Nephilim be more than legend? Could they preserve a memory of a civilization with knowledge and strength that we can no longer comprehend? Baalbek stands as a monument to this possibility, a place where the immense stones whisper of hands too large, of minds too advanced, and of a history that stretches far beyond the reach of written record. The scale of the stones, the precision of the construction, and the endurance of the myths together create a narrative that challenges everything we think we know about human capability. Standing beside a trilithon, the human body shrinks against its mass. The mind struggles to imagine how such weight could have been lifted, moved, or positioned. In these moments, the legends gain plausibility, and the mysteries of Baalbek feel less like stories and more like a warning that history contains depths and heights we may only glimpse, and that some of the greatest feats of the past may have been witnessed by giants. The myths do not merely entertain, they illuminate, providing a bridge between the measurable reality of stone and the immeasurable realm of imagination and legend, leaving a sense that the ancient builders of Baalbek, whether human, divine, or something else entirely, left behind a record of greatness that cannot be ignored. The arrival of the Romans in the Bekaa Valley marked a new chapter in Baalbek's long and enigmatic history. Conventional accounts attribute the construction of the Temple of Jupiter to the Roman engineers and architects of the 1st century BC, under the direction of Augustus and his successors. They arrived to a landscape already shaped by the labor of countless generations, where colossal stones, some weighing 800 tons or more, rested in a foundation whose scale and precision exceeded anything the Romans had attempted in their own capital. The narrative that the Romans built the entire complex, as impressive as it is, begins to fray under closer examination, revealing a more nuanced reality. Roman efforts at Baalbek were indeed remarkable, but their contributions must be measured against the pre-existing grandeur they encountered. The upper-level structures of the Temple of Jupiter, with Corinthian columns soaring 65 feet into the sky, decorative friezes carved with intricate precision, and porticos that emphasize symmetry and scale, demonstrate the Romans' mastery of classical architecture. These elements were undeniably sophisticated, representing the peak of Roman engineering and artistic sensibility. The columns themselves, standing tall and imposing, were lifted into place with ingenuity and careful planning, their massive stones carved from local quarries and transported over hundreds of meters to the temple's upper levels. The decorative elements, the pediments, the cornices, the carved motifs, reflect an unmistakable Roman aesthetic, one that matches what is found throughout the empire from Ostia to Ephesus. Yet when these contributions are placed alongside the megalithic foundation, the contrast is staggering. The trilithons, each weighing roughly 800 tons, dwarf the largest stones the Romans could move anywhere in their empire. In Rome, the largest single stones, such as the capital block of Trajan's Column, weighed a mere 53 tons, less than 1/15 the weight of the trilithons. Even the massive obelisks transported from Egypt to Rome, feats that took decades and hundreds of workers, pale in comparison. The Roman engineers, brilliant though they were, had never before encountered stones of such immensity, and the methods and tools required to manipulate them remained beyond the known capabilities of their time. This disparity raises a profound question. When the Romans arrived at Baalbek, were they creators or inheritors? The evidence suggests that the Romans were working atop a foundation that already embodied an extraordinary level of skill, foresight, and ambition. The lower terraces and megalithic walls, cut with precision, fitted together without mortar, and aligned across massive distances, could not easily have been replicated using Roman techniques, which relied on smaller stones, cranes, and standardized measurement systems. The foundation stones at Baalbek were not just large, they were extraordinarily precise, aligned to create a platform capable of supporting structures far heavier than anything Rome could muster on its own. Roman construction at Baalbek focused primarily on what they could feasibly achieve, the upper-level structures and visible temple elements that expressed their aesthetic and cultural identity. The massive retaining walls and foundation stones, the trilithons and their supporting 350-ton blocks were already in place, and the Romans integrated these into their architectural vision. Their work demonstrates mastery of proportional design and structural ingenuity, but it does not explain the existence of the megaliths beneath their feet. In essence, the Romans inherited an extraordinary engineering legacy and adapted it for their purposes rather than originating it themselves. Comparing the stones themselves underscores this point. A typical Roman construction project, whether an aqueduct, amphitheater, or temple, utilized stones within a manageable size range, optimized for human labor, aided by cranes, pulleys, and scaffolding. The Colosseum, arguably one of the greatest architectural achievements of Rome, relied on stones that were large enough to impress, yet small enough to handle with the engineering methods available. At Baalbek, the contrast is stark. The foundation blocks are 10 times heavier than the largest granite blocks used in Egypt's Great Pyramid, and far beyond anything the Romans moved elsewhere in their empire. To place a trilithon at the base of a temple would require forces, coordination, and techniques for which there is no evidence that the Romans had knowledge or experience. The Romans themselves may have been aware of the scale and difficulty of the work they encountered. Ancient historians and later chroniclers note the grandeur of Baalbek, describing it as the most imposing temple complex of the eastern provinces. It is not hard to imagine Roman engineers standing before the trilithons, marveling at their sheer size and precision, recognizing a level of craftsmanship that surpassed their own standards. Their task, then, may have been one of adaptation and embellishment, using the existing foundation to create a monument that expressed Roman power, culture, and religious identity without needing to replicate the impossible scale of the original stones. The decorative and structural choices made by the Romans at Baalbek further reinforce this perspective. Columns and entablatures were constructed using stones within practical lifting limits, generally under 100 tons. The use of cranes, capstans, and teams of workers allowed them to erect towering columns and roof structures, but even the largest elements pale in comparison to the foundational megaliths. The Romans excelled at artistry, proportion, and visible grandeur, yet their contributions never required them to solve the engineering paradox posed by the trilithons. They were working within the envelope of what was physically possible, constrained by human strength and the mechanical advantage of their tools. The scale and complexity of the upper structures also suggest that the Romans may have chosen Baalbek for its pre-existing grandeur. The enormous foundation allowed them to build a temple that would dominate the landscape, visible from miles across the valley, while requiring fewer resources than if they had started from scratch. In this sense, the Romans were opportunistic, capitalizing on the legacy of an earlier, unknown civilization whose capabilities remain mysterious. The placement of the 65-foot Corinthian columns, the decorative motifs, and the alignment of the upper-level temple structures all demonstrate a careful application of Roman engineering principles, but they do not account for the foundational megaliths, whose weight and precision remain an unsolved challenge. Even the logistics of the site highlight the Romans' inherited role. Baalbek lies over 2,000 kilometers from Rome, in a remote valley of the Levant, far from the empire's heartland. Transporting massive stones from quarries to the site would have been extraordinarily difficult, and yet the trilithons are already in position when the Romans arrived. They built atop a platform whose scale had been established by predecessors, whose identity is lost to history, integrating massive blocks into a complex that had already been engineered to withstand the passage of millennia. The architectural contrast between the pre-Roman foundation and the Roman additions is evident in the precision of cutting, the alignment of joints, and the sheer size of the stones. While the Romans applied their characteristic symmetry, proportions, and decorative style, they could not have replicated the techniques needed to move and position 800-ton blocks with such perfection. The foundation stone's weathering, tool marks, and fit suggest methods and knowledge far removed from conventional Roman practices, further separating the achievements of the megalithic builders from those of the empire's engineers. Ultimately, the Romans at Baalbek may have been less creators than curators. They adapted and augmented an existing platform of unimaginable scale, applying their artistry and engineering to structures they could feasibly build while leaving the mysteries of the foundation untouched. In doing so, they created a composite monument, a Roman temple atop a megalithic foundation, blending the practical capabilities of their civilization with the enduring achievements of a culture whose skill and ambition remain difficult to comprehend. Across the millennia, Baalbek stands not in isolation, but as part of a broader story of monumental stone construction that spans continents and cultures. When we examine the site alongside other megalithic wonders of the ancient world, striking parallels emerge, raising profound questions about the limits of prehistoric engineering and the potential for shared knowledge across vast distances. The Great Pyramid of Giza, constructed from blocks weighing up to 80 tons, represents one of humanity's earliest and most iconic feats of precision engineering. The stones were quarried, transported, and meticulously placed to form a structure of immense scale and stability, one that has endured for over 4,000 years. Yet even these colossal blocks pale in comparison to the trilithons of Baalbek, which weigh roughly 10 times more, some reaching 800 tons or more. This disparity forces us to confront the question not only of technical capability, but also of intent. Why would different civilizations across time choose to manipulate stones on such an enormous scale, and with what knowledge or purpose? Stonehenge, on the windswept plains of southern England, provides another point of comparison. The largest sarsen stones at Stonehenge weigh approximately 45 tons, less than a 20th of Baalbek's trilithons. Yet the challenge faced by its builders was similar: the quarrying, transport, and precise placement of massive stones, accomplished without the wheel, iron tools, or modern machinery. The monument's alignment with celestial events, particularly solstices, indicates an advanced understanding of astronomy and spatial measurement, suggesting that prehistoric cultures were capable of integrating architectural, engineering, and astronomical knowledge in ways that continue to intrigue modern scholars. The parallels with Baalbek are hard to ignore. In both cases, massive stones were moved and positioned with extraordinary precision, far beyond what conventional assumptions of labor and technology would predict. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey pushes this narrative even further back in time. Dated to around 11,000 years ago, the site predates both the pyramids and the Roman Empire. Its T-shaped pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, were carved, transported, and erected by a society that, according to conventional understanding, had not yet developed agriculture or complex urban infrastructure. The presence of intricate reliefs and the arrangement of massive stones in circular enclosures demonstrate a level of planning, coordination, and artistic vision previously thought impossible for hunter-gatherer societies. Here, as at Baalbek, we see evidence that prehistoric humans, or civilizations whose origins remain obscure, were capable of manipulating monumental stones for ceremonial, astronomical, or structural purposes. These similarities suggest a recurring pattern. Across time and space, human societies have repeatedly confronted the challenge of massive construction, and in some cases have succeeded at scales that challenge conventional engineering logic. The question then arises, were these achievements isolated, or could they reflect the transmission of knowledge across cultures and generations? While no definitive evidence exists to prove direct contact between ancient Egypt, the Levant, and the British Isles, the recurrence of megalithic techniques, careful quarrying, precise cutting, transportation of stones far exceeding human weight limits, alignment with celestial markers, suggests a possibility that certain principles of construction and measurement were independently discovered or even widely shared in the ancient world. Some researchers propose that these sites may represent vestiges of a forgotten global network of architectural knowledge, a tradition of monumental construction that transcended individual civilizations. Others suggest that advanced techniques may have been lost and rediscovered repeatedly, leaving behind enigmatic stone structures that echo across millennia. One of the most fascinating details in this global context is Baalbek's orientation relative to Giza. The site lies approximately 5 degrees east and 4 degrees north of the Great Pyramid. Some researchers propose that this alignment was intentional, part of a sophisticated system of geodetic or astronomical surveying. If true, it implies a level of spatial understanding capable of measuring and plotting coordinates over vast distances, something that would have required not only practical knowledge of measurement and mathematics, but also a conceptualization of the Earth on a scale far beyond local observation. The alignment suggests that Baalbek may have been more than a ceremonial or religious center. It could have functioned as a marker in an early network of survey points, mapping the world with stone as its primary instrument. The comparison of Baalbek with other megalithic sites also invites speculation about the purpose of these monuments. At Giza, the pyramid's precise cardinal alignments and internal geometry indicate a combination of religious, cultural, and perhaps astronomical significance. At Stonehenge, The positioning of stones allows for tracking of solstices and lunar cycles, revealing a sophisticated awareness of celestial patterns. At Göbekli Tepe, the carvings and enclosures suggest symbolic and ritual purposes, likely connected to social cohesion, mythology, or cosmology. Baalbek fits into this pattern not only through its massive scale, but also through its placement, orientation, and enduring visibility across the Bekaa Valley. The site's trilithons and terraces are not merely structural, they may encode knowledge of geometry, surveying, or astronomy, reflecting a worldview in which stone, space, and sky were intimately connected. The possibility of cross-cultural influence is further reinforced by recurring architectural motifs and engineering methods. The precision of stone cutting at Baalbek, with blocks fitted to tolerances of centimeters, echoes techniques observed at Giza and in certain megalithic structures in Peru and Malta. The alignment of monumental stones with solar and celestial events is another shared feature, suggesting a universal human fascination with the heavens and the integration of that understanding into large-scale construction projects. Whether these similarities reflect direct knowledge transfer, parallel invention, or a combination of both remains unresolved, but the evidence points to a shared ambition: the manipulation of massive stones to create structures that endure across time. Modern engineering experiments attempting to replicate these feats emphasize the enormity of the task. Moving an 800-ton block today with cranes, hydraulics, and heavy machinery is a challenge requiring careful planning, immense resources, and safety considerations. For prehistoric or ancient civilizations, the challenge was exponentially greater. The repeated success of such monumental projects across different cultures and eras suggests either a profound level of ingenuity or access to techniques that have been lost, forgotten, or obscured by time. Ultimately, the connections between Baalbek, Giza, Stonehenge, and Göbekli Tepe encourage us to expand our understanding of prehistoric engineering. These sites, separated by geography and millennia, share a commitment to scale, precision, and orientation that challenges conventional timelines of technological development. Baalbek, with its massive trilithons and carefully aligned terraces, may have been part of a global pattern, a tradition of monumental construction that combined practical engineering, astronomical knowledge, and symbolic purpose. Whether this represents a continuity of lost technology, independent innovation, or a network of cultural exchange remains an open question. The extraordinary scale of Baalbek in the context of these global megalithic structures compels us to reconsider our assumptions about ancient civilizations. The site is more than a local phenomenon. It may reflect a universal human drive to manipulate the natural world on a grand scale, to leave enduring marks that combine artistry, mathematics, and cosmic awareness. Its orientation relative to Giza, its unmatched size, and its alignment with broader patterns of megalithic construction suggest that Baalbek could have been part of a conceptual network, linking distant cultures through shared ambition, observation, and engineering mastery. In this light, Baalbek is not simply a Roman temple or a local curiosity. It is a testament to humanity's enduring fascination with stone, scale, and the sky, a point of connection in a much larger story of ancient ingenuity and the pursuit of monumental legacy. Across the globe, from the deserts of Egypt to the plains of England, from the hills of Turkey to the Bekaa Valley, the pattern is clear. Humans have long sought to move mountains, to shape stones beyond comprehension, and to align their works with the heavens. Baalbek stands at the apex of this tradition, a reminder that the story of megalithic construction is not confined to a single culture, era, or continent. It challenges us to consider the possibility that the achievements of our ancestors were part of a wider network of knowledge, one that stretched across oceans and deserts, leaving behind monumental clues that continue to awe, puzzle, and inspire us today. Was Baalbek simply a local marvel, or was it a node in a prehistoric web of monumental knowledge, a link between civilizations separated by thousands of kilometers, yet united by a shared understanding of scale, precision, and the cosmos? The answer remains elusive, but the stones themselves, silent and imposing, invite us to explore a vision of the ancient world that is far larger, far more interconnected, and far more ambitious than we have ever imagined. Long before the Romans arrived in the Bekaa Valley, Baalbek stood as a place of reverence, a center of spiritual significance whose foundations predate the first empires. The name itself offers a clue: Baal, meaning Lord in the ancient Semitic tongue, and often associated with the sun god, signals that the site's earliest builders may have been drawn to celestial worship. To these early civilizations, the sun was more than a source of light. It was a measure of time, a symbol of power, and a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The massive stones of Baalbek, carefully placed and aligned, may have been intended not merely as a display of engineering prowess, but as an architectural hymn to the heavens, a way to anchor human understanding of the cosmos in the permanence of stone. Archaeological evidence shows that Baalbek was continuously occupied from the early Bronze Age, roughly 2900 to 2300 BC. Across millennia, successive cultures built upon the site, each layer adding complexity while preserving a sacred memory of the space. The foundation stones of the megalithic platform, some weighing hundreds of tons, were not simply structural. Their sheer scale and careful placement reflect a vision that blends engineering, ritual, and celestial observation. These stones form terraces that rise above the valley, as though preparing to receive the sun at its zenith. The ancient builders may have understood the sun's path with precision, orienting their work to track its movement across the year. Every shadow cast, every light that glints off the edges of the trilithons may have served as a signal, a calendar, or a ceremonial marker for the rhythms of life and ritual. Phoenician traditions and Egyptian influences seem to converge at Baalbek, creating a tapestry of myth and meaning that extends far beyond the Levant. Phoenician historians, such as Sanchoniathon, recorded stories of divine beings and cosmic architects who shaped the world, linking the Levantine coastline to Egypt through shared mythology and religious practice. These narratives recount deities, demigods, and the construction of monumental temples dedicated to the sun and sky. According to ancient accounts, Egyptian priests are said to have performed rituals at Baalbek, connecting the site to Heliopolis, their own city of the sun. Macrobius, writing centuries later, described Egyptian influence on Baalbek, asserting that priests carried their sacred knowledge across the Mediterranean, consecrating the stones and ensuring that the temple aligned with the celestial order. The connection between Baalbek and Heliopolis, Egypt, is more than mythic. The Egyptian city was renowned for its astronomical knowledge, and its priests were deeply skilled in geometry, measurement, and observation. If these techniques were brought to Baalbek, they may explain some of the extraordinary precision evident in the trilithons and terraces. The stones are not randomly placed. They follow a coherent plan that could have integrated astronomical alignments, ritual pathways, and sacred geometry. The possibility that knowledge traveled across vast distances through priests, scholars, or envoys suggests that Baalbek may have functioned as a node in a network of sacred sites, each reflecting the movement of the sun, the cycles of the heavens, and the cosmological worldview of ancient civilizations. Legends of giants, divine builders, and the Nephilim intertwine with the solar worship at Baalbek, creating a symbolic narrative that bridges myth and monumental architecture. According to local tradition, the enormous stones could not have been moved by ordinary humans. Stories collected by Estefan Dowaihi, the Maronite patriarch, describe early builders as giants, creatures of extraordinary strength, who may have been charged with lifting the trilithons and placing them with impossible precision. Similarly, Sanchoniathon recounts a race of semi-divine beings, the Elohim, or sons of the gods, who interacted with humans to construct extraordinary monuments. In both cases, myth preserves a memory of physical scale that challenges our understanding. The stones are simply too massive for conventional methods to explain. The persistence of these legends across centuries indicates that the ancients themselves recognized Baalbek as extraordinary, a place where the sacred, the human, and the cosmic converged. The Temple of Jupiter, constructed by the Romans on this pre-existing platform, further reinforces the sacred nature of the site. Though the Romans brought decorative elements, Corinthian columns, and architectural embellishments, they were building atop a foundation that already carried religious significance. The alignment of their structures did not erase the spiritual memory embedded in the megaliths. Instead, it respected and amplified it. Macrobius described ceremonies performed at the site, including processions and offerings timed to the solar cycle, suggesting that Baalbek remained a living center of worship even under Roman administration. The Romans may have marveled at what they inherited, but they were also participants in a longer, more intricate story of devotion and astronomical awareness. The sun god, represented in Baalbek by Baal or Heliopolitan traditions, provides a unifying thread through the myths, rituals, and architecture. The massive stones, elevated terraces, and carefully planned pathways may have functioned as instruments of observation. As the sun rose and set, its light would strike the stones in specific ways, marking solstices, equinoxes, or other ritual moments. The alignment of the site with celestial bodies, combined with its orientation relative to other ancient monuments, suggests that Baalbek was part of a broader network in which the movement of the sun and the design of the landscape were inseparable. This integration of astronomy and architecture reflects a worldview in which knowledge of the heavens was both practical and sacred, enabling societies to synchronize religious practice, agriculture, and governance with cosmic cycles. The persistence of sacred activity at Baalbek over thousands of years highlights its extraordinary resilience as a site of human observation and belief. The stones themselves, silent and imposing, bear witness to the continuity of ritual, the memory of divine association, and the technical skill required to manipulate their immense mass. Each layer of construction, from the prehistoric foundation to the Roman embellishments, represents an acknowledgement of this enduring power. The myths and legends, while fantastical, may encode real historical memory, a recognition that extraordinary beings or extraordinary knowledge were required to move stones of such scale and align them with the sun. Baalbek also raises questions about the relationship between myth and engineering. The tales of giants and divine builders may not simply be fanciful stories. They could be metaphorical descriptions of techniques, social organization, or lost technologies that allowed ancient people to achieve feats otherwise considered impossible. The blending of folklore, religious practice, and monumental construction suggests a sophisticated understanding of symbolism, stone, sky, and story working together to create a landscape that was at once functional, ceremonial, and cosmic. The legends themselves preserve a memory of scale, precision, and celestial alignment, echoing the enduring mystery of the trilithons and terraces. The convergence of Phoenician, Egyptian, and local Levantine traditions at Baalbek indicates that the site was not an isolated creation, but a crossroads of cultural, spiritual, and astronomical knowledge. Priests, architects, and artisans may have traveled, communicated, and exchanged techniques, infusing the stones with layers of meaning that extend beyond the practical task of construction. The alignment of the site with celestial markers, its continuous sacred occupation, and the myths surrounding its creation suggest a deliberate intertwining of human labor, religious devotion, and astronomical observation. Baalbek becomes more than a monument. It is a record in stone of humanity's attempt to understand and participate in the order of the cosmos. Even today, the site's alignment, scale, and mythic associations challenge our understanding. Scholars debate whether the stone's placement had astronomical function, symbolic meaning, or both. The rituals of the priests, the accounts of historians like Macrobius, and the legends of giants all point to a recognition that Baalbek was extraordinary in ways that defy simple explanation. Its connection to Heliopolis in Egypt, to the sun god, and to local folklore suggests that knowledge, reverence, and engineering expertise were inseparable in its creation. The site stands as a testament to the integration of myth, astronomy, and monumental construction, hinting at knowledge we have yet to decode, and at a worldview in which the alignment of gods, giants, and stones was not metaphor, but a deliberate expression of cosmic understanding. What do you think about this? Share with us in the comments section. The stones of Baalbek are immense beyond ordinary comprehension. The trilithons alone weigh approximately 800 tons each, while the massive platform stones beneath them reach 350 tons, and scattered throughout the site lie monoliths of 600 tons or more. Each of these stones is not only enormous in weight, but precisely shaped, positioned with a level of accuracy that challenges even modern engineering. When standing beside a single trilithon, it is nearly impossible to imagine the force and ingenuity required to move it, to lift it, to set it in place with the precision evident on the megalithic platform. The stones themselves are more than structural. They are statements of technical skill and ambition, a testament to human, or perhaps extraordinary capability. Scholars and engineers have long grappled with the question of how such massive blocks were moved and placed. The logistics are staggering. Transporting an 800-ton stone even a short distance today would require cranes and machinery of exceptional capacity, and yet Baalbek's builders achieved this without any record of the technologies we now take for granted. One of the first attempts to theorize methods came from Jean-Pierre Adam, who suggested a combination of rollers, capstans, and pulley blocks. According to his calculations, moving a 557-ton block could be accomplished with roughly 512 workers. This is still an enormous labor investment, and these estimates do not fully account for the immense difficulty of lifting stones 30 feet above the ground, as seen in the trilithon's placement. Other scholars have proposed even more dramatic figures. Some estimates suggest that moving the largest stones might have required tens of thousands of men working in coordinated effort, combining levers, wooden sleds, and possibly lubricated paths. These scenarios, while theoretically possible, raise as many questions as they answer. How could such a massive workforce be organized to work in perfect unison? How could the blocks be stabilized, lifted, and precisely positioned on a platform built from other stones of extraordinary size? The scale of the task goes beyond conventional Roman or Phoenician engineering, extending into a realm of possibility that challenges our assumptions about prehistoric capabilities. Modern engineers have attempted to model these feats using simulations, applying physics and structural principles to the problem. Ramps have long been suggested as one potential solution, similar to those theorized for the pyramids of Egypt. A stone could be dragged up a carefully constructed incline using friction-reducing methods to gradually raise it into place. Counterweights might have been employed to offset the immense mass, enabling levers and pulleys to incrementally lift a stone without the need for thousands of workers. Some researchers have even speculated about the use of water or other lubricants to reduce friction, allowing sleds to glide across prepared paths. Despite these theoretical models, none fully account for the scale and precision observed at Baalbek. The trilithons are not only enormous, but aligned to exact measurements, with edges and surfaces matching so closely that the slightest deviation could compromise the stability of the entire platform. Modern experiments attempting to replicate such feats consistently demonstrate the extraordinary difficulty of the task. Even with today's technology, lifting an 800-ton monolith onto a pre-existing structure with the same accuracy remains a major engineering challenge. The stones of Baalbek, in their sheer weight and precise placement, continue to defy replication. Adding to the mystery is the sheer variety of the stones at Baalbek. Beyond the trilithons, the platform stones themselves weigh 350 tons, carefully positioned to support the immense load above. Elsewhere, monoliths scattered across the site reach 600 tons, each cut and shaped with remarkable skill. The effort required to quarry, transport, and position even a single stone is extraordinary. The combined complexity of moving dozens or hundreds of such stones multiplies the challenge exponentially. The builders would have needed not only a deep understanding of physics and leverage, but also meticulous planning, organization, and tools capable of withstanding extraordinary stress. The placement of the stones also raises profound questions about engineering knowledge. The trilithons rest upon 24 smaller yet still massive stones, forming a foundation that has endured thousands of years. The interplay of weight, balance, and structural integrity is evident in the way each stone supports the others, distributing force in a manner that preserves the platform over millennia. Such precision suggests a mastery of geometry and material behavior that is exceptional, particularly for a civilization often assumed to lack advanced machinery. Every block is perfectly aligned, every surface carefully dressed, a silent record of calculation and technique. Some theories suggest that ancient builders may have combined multiple techniques in ways that are difficult for modern engineers to imagine. The use of temporary scaffolding, interlocking levers, and precisely angled ramps could have allowed a relatively small workforce to achieve feats of seemingly impossible magnitude. It is also possible that techniques, now lost to history, employed principles of mechanical advantage that modern simulations cannot fully capture. Water, rope, wood, and stone could have been manipulated in ingenious ways to achieve results that appear supernatural to observers centuries later. The implications of Baalbek's engineering reach beyond the practical. If these methods existed, they indicate a level of knowledge about physics, leverage, and material science far ahead of what is traditionally attributed to ancient societies. The combination of massive stones, precise alignment, and the absence of surviving documentation makes it difficult to attribute the accomplishment solely to known civilizations. The Romans, often credited with the upper structures, certainly had impressive engineering skills, but they left no records of the original foundation or the methods used to place the colossal trilithons. This absence of documentation leaves room for speculation about prehistoric builders, forgotten technologies, or methods that have simply vanished over time. The weight of the stones, their precise placement, and the scale of the platform demand a re-evaluation of what is possible within ancient engineering. A trilithon weighing 800 tons is 10 times heavier than the largest stones of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the newly discovered 1,650-ton block in the quarry dwarfs even that. Positioning such stones requires not only brute force, but an understanding of mechanical principles that allow forces to be managed, distributed, and controlled. Even the most sophisticated modern cranes would struggle to place a stone of that size without substantial planning and auxiliary support structures. Every theory proposed, from ramps to counterweights, from lubricated sleds to coordinated manpower, leaves unanswered questions. How were the stones cut with such precision? How were they transported across uneven terrain without modern machinery? How were they lifted into place on a platform that itself required perfect leveling and stability? These questions extend beyond the technical into the philosophical. The physics involved is staggering, and yet somehow it was achieved. The stones of Baalbek are more than relics. They are proof of capability, evidence that forces and knowledge beyond conventional expectation were harnessed in ways we struggle to replicate. Even today, engineers running simulations, building scale models, or applying computer-aided physics cannot fully recreate the placement of these colossal stones. What do you think about this? Archaeology at Baalbek has long been a mixture of meticulous observation, scholarly debate, and moments of breathtaking discovery. The site has attracted explorers, historians, and engineers for centuries, each drawn by the sheer scale of the megaliths and the mystery of their construction. One of the earliest significant investigations was carried out by Louis F. de Saulcy, a French scholar who visited the site in March 1851. De Saulcy was immediately struck by the size and precision of the megalithic platform, particularly the trilithons. Unlike the Roman additions above, the massive foundation stones exhibited a level of workmanship that seemed almost impossible for the era to which they were traditionally attributed. De Saulcy suggested that these colossal blocks might represent the remains of a pre-Roman temple, a claim that challenged conventional assumptions and set the stage for later debates about Baalbek's origins. Following de Saulcy, Ernest Renan, another French archaeologist, arrived at Baalbek with the intent of confirming or refuting the presence of pre-Roman structures. Initially skeptical, Renan expected to find evidence that the site was entirely Roman. However, upon closer examination, he observed that the megalithic foundation and the massive stones used in the platform were clearly distinct from the Roman additions. The cutting techniques, jointing and weathering patterns suggested an origin that predated Roman construction by centuries, if not millennia. Renan proposed that these foundational stones might have been the work of Phoenician builders, further complicating the narrative and highlighting the layered history of Baalbek. In the modern era, engineering studies have provided additional insights into the extraordinary precision of these pre-Roman structures. Jean-Pierre Adam, a French structural engineer, conducted detailed analyses of the site, focusing on the movement and placement of the massive blocks. He theorized that techniques involving rollers, capstans, and pulley systems could have been employed to move the largest stones, though he acknowledged the limitations of this approach, particularly when considering the weight of the trilithons, which are estimated at 800 tons each. Adam's work underscored the remarkable engineering skills evident at Baalbek and the challenges of reconciling modern theoretical models with the scale and accuracy of the ancient construction. Perhaps the most extraordinary recent discovery came in 2014, when Professor Janine Abdelmassi and the German Archaeological Institute uncovered a previously unrecognized stone in a nearby quarry. This block, now recognized as the largest known worked stone in the world, weighs an estimated 1,650 tons. Partially buried beneath sediment, its full dimensions were not initially clear, but even in its incomplete exposure, the magnitude of the block was staggering. This newly discovered monolith dwarfs even the famous trilithons that form the foundation of the Temple of Jupiter and raises profound questions about the capabilities and intentions of the builders. The proximity of this block to the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, which weighs approximately 1,000 tons, emphasizes that Baalbek's quarries were intended for stones of monumental scale, many of which were never transported to the temple complex itself. Archaeological evidence from the quarrying areas offers additional insight into the methods used by the builders. Patterns in the extraction suggest a highly organized process, with channels and cut marks indicating that the stones were carefully planned before being separated from the bedrock. Sediment covering some of the largest blocks, including the 1,650-ton stone, implies that these monoliths were deliberately abandoned or left unfinished, a fact that raises questions about construction priorities and technological limits. It is possible that the builders intended to move these colossal stones but found the task insurmountable, or perhaps these stones were reserved for a phase of construction never realized. Either scenario adds to the enigmatic nature of Baalbek, showing that even in antiquity, plans may have outstripped capabilities. The pre-Roman precision at Baalbek is particularly striking. The trilithons, for example, fit together with extraordinary accuracy, resting on a foundation of 350-ton stones that themselves demonstrate careful leveling and alignment. Each stone is cut with a level of craftsmanship that ensures stability and longevity, capable of withstanding millennia of earthquakes, weathering, and erosion. The exactitude of these megaliths is a key reason why many scholars and engineers remain fascinated with Baalbek. The Romans, who later added the Temple of Jupiter and other structures, did not employ the same techniques at this scale, suggesting that the pre-Roman builders possessed knowledge and skill that were either lost or purposefully abandoned in later periods. The discovery of the 1,650-ton stone also offers insight into the scale of ambition at Baalbek. If the smaller trilithons, weighing 800 tons, were already a monumental challenge, the intention to work with blocks twice that weight implies either advanced techniques now forgotten or a level of labor coordination that strains credulity. The sediment covering these stones has preserved them, allowing modern archaeologists to study the precision of the cuts, the angles of separation, and even the orientation of the stone relative to the quarry and the temple site. These details suggest careful planning and remarkable foresight, implying that the builders had not only physical strength, but an understanding of geometry, leverage, and structural engineering far beyond what is commonly assumed for the period. In addition to quarry studies, archaeological investigations have highlighted the layering of Baalbek's construction. Analysis of the foundation. Stones versus the Roman additions above demonstrate stark differences in technique and style. While the upper-level Roman columns, friezes, and pediments are impressive in their own right, they rely on a platform whose precision and scale far exceed anything seen in Rome itself. This contrast reinforces the notion that the Romans were not the originators of Baalbek's most extraordinary features, but rather inheritors of a pre-existing megalithic foundation. The sediment, weathering, and quarry patterns all support the conclusion that Baalbek's earliest builders operated with knowledge and ambition that remain largely opaque to us. Every new archaeological investigation at Baalbek deepens the mystery. The work of de Saulcy, Renan, and Adam laid the groundwork for understanding the technical achievement represented by the site, while the discoveries of Abdelmasih and the German Archaeological Institute have expanded the scale of what we know. Each new stone revealed, each layer of sediment cleared, and each quarry examined contributes additional detail to a puzzle that refuses to be fully solved. The more we uncover, the more apparent it becomes that Baalbek was conceived as an extraordinary architectural project, one that combined vision, technical skill, and ambition on a scale unmatched in the ancient world. The precision of the pre-Roman structures, the massive abandoned stones in the quarry, and the layering of different construction phases suggest that Baalbek's story extends far beyond conventional historical narratives. The alignment, orientation, and monumental scale all point to a civilization, or series of civilizations, that operated with knowledge and capability that we have yet to fully comprehend. As archaeologists continue to explore the site, clearing debris, measuring blocks, and analyzing cut marks, the hope remains that each new discovery will illuminate the techniques, intentions, and culture behind Baalbek's astonishing foundations. Yet with each revelation, the enigma grows, inviting deeper inquiry into one of humanity's most remarkable and enduring engineering mysteries. Throughout history, humans have struggled to explain feats that seem to exceed the natural limits of their own capabilities. When confronted with constructions that dwarf ordinary human strength, ancient storytellers often turned to myth, weaving tales of giants, titans, and divine beings whose power could move mountains. At Baalbek, the colossal stones seem to demand such stories. The trilithons, weighing roughly 800 tons each, the platform stones of 350 tons, and the enormous monoliths in the quarries that reach 1,650 tons, create a scale that is difficult to reconcile with ordinary human labor, even when imagining armies of thousands. Local legends speak of giants, sometimes called the Nephilim or Titans, who labored to erect temples that reached toward the heavens. These myths are not isolated. Across the ancient world, from the Tower of Babel to the myths of the Greek Titans, there are repeated narratives of colossal beings building monumental structures, often in defiance of natural law. At Baalbek, the size of the stones naturally invites these stories because they seem to demand impossible strength and precision. The notion of giants or divine architects provides more than just mythological intrigue. When these stories are placed alongside the engineering realities of Baalbek, they create a philosophical question. Could the legends have emerged as a form of encoded memory? Civilizations with an awareness of pre-existing structures might have turned to myth to explain the origin of things they could not reproduce or fully understand.
The Romans themselves, when they arrived at Baalbek, worked atop an ancient platform they could not match in scale. Perhaps the myths that surround the site preserve fragments of memory from a time when the construction of such monuments was still within human reach, or when knowledge was accessible that has since been lost. Legends of giants building monumental structures could be symbolic, representing the memory of advanced techniques or extraordinary labor that ordinary humans could not comprehend. The scale of Baalbek's stones invites direct comparison to these myths. The trilithons alone are larger than anything the Romans attempted, and modern engineering still struggles to lift such weights without specialized machinery. The largest monolith discovered in the quarry, weighing 1,650 tons, surpasses anything that has been successfully moved in recorded history. When these measurements are overlaid with stories of titans and Nephilim, the correspondence is striking. Myths speak of beings capable of lifting, moving, and shaping enormous stones, often as part of sacred or
monumental projects. Baalbek stones are precisely that, enormous, carefully shaped, and deliberately positioned, with an accuracy that suggests both intention and extraordinary skill. In this sense, the legends may function as a metaphorical bridge between human perception and reality, attempting to make sense of a world that defies ordinary understanding. Ancient texts offer further context for this blending of myth and reality. Sanchoniathon, the Phoenician historian, wrote of divine or semi-divine beings who acted as architects and rulers, shaping both the natural and built world. Stories from the Maronite patriarch Estefan Dawaihi describe a world populated by giants, suggesting that these beings were responsible for extraordinary feats of construction, including the foundations of temples and fortified cities. In both cases, the texts combine observation with imagination, using the language of myth to describe achievements that would have been impossible for ordinary humans to accomplish alone. At Baalbek, where the largest stones far exceed Roman engineering capacities, the correlation between legend and physical reality is particularly compelling. The philosophical dimension of these myths cannot be ignored. When human beings encounter limits, they create narratives to stretch understanding. In doing so, myths may preserve a memory of lost knowledge, a record of techniques, labor organization, or engineering principles that have disappeared from living practice. The legends surrounding Baalbek, of giants and divine builders, can thus be seen as echoes of a technical reality that was remarkable in its time. Perhaps the stories survived because the physical reality could not be fully reproduced or explained. Where ancient humans faced the incomprehensible, they may have encoded the truth into the language of gods, titans, and extraordinary progeny, preserving a cultural memory of capabilities that were otherwise inaccessible. The interplay between myth and measurement becomes particularly clear when examining Baalbek in comparison to other megalithic sites. At Stonehenge, the largest stones weigh only a fraction of the Baalbek monoliths, yet legends of giants moving them persist. The Great Pyramid of Giza also inspired stories of gods, divine intervention, or advanced knowledge. In each case, the myths correspond to structures whose scale challenges human ability. Baalbek takes this principle to an extreme. When one considers a 1,650-ton block that remains in the quarry, alongside 800-ton trilithons precisely set 30 feet above the ground, the legends of mighty builders start to read less like fantasy and more like an imaginative attempt to contextualize reality. The ancient mind may have turned physical impossibility into narrative, using myth as a way to encode respect for technical genius, or perhaps to warn of forces beyond human control. Scientific inquiry adds another dimension to this discussion. Modern engineers modeling the movement and placement of Baalbek stones struggle to recreate plausible methods. Ramps, levers, counterweights, and lubrication techniques can explain some of the smaller blocks, yet the largest remain effectively immovable by any practical means known today. These engineering challenges provide a concrete backdrop to the myths. The impossible becomes comprehensible only through stories. In this light, the legends of giants, Nephilim, and Titans are not simply fanciful tales. They are attempts to preserve understanding of phenomena that could not be otherwise explained. The fusion of folklore and science, narrative and measurement suggests a continuum, human imagination filling the gaps left by limitations in technology and knowledge. Even the alignment and placement of Baalbek may reflect this synthesis of myth and practical knowledge. Some theories propose that Baalbek, like other ancient sites, was oriented with astronomical precision, possibly marking solstices, equinoxes, or important celestial events. Ultimately, Baalbek sits at the intersection of these global mysteries. The colossal stones, the precision of construction, and the alignment with distant sites suggest that it is part of a continuum of ancient achievement, one that spans Egypt, the Levant, and beyond. Whether through direct transmission of knowledge, shared engineering paradigms, or independent but convergent development, the evidence points to a human capacity for monumental construction that was far greater than commonly assumed. By comparing Baalbek with other ancient sites, a pattern emerges. Humanity's past is filled with extraordinary feats that challenge modern understanding, suggesting that Baalbek is not just a singular marvel, but a window into a network of builders whose techniques, ambitions, and vision remain largely hidden from history. The colossal stones, carefully aligned and precisely cut, serve as silent testimony. They hint at knowledge, skill, and ambition that transcended local communities and time periods. Across the ancient world, these sites collectively suggest that monumental architecture was a universal expression of human ingenuity. Beneath the desert sun of Baalbek, the stones stand as silent witnesses to a story we have yet to fully understand. They are enormous, immovable in ways that defy conventional reasoning, each monolith weighing hundreds or even over 1,000 tons. Some lie in the quarries, untouched for millennia, as if awaiting discovery but not completion. The scale alone raises immediate questions. How could any society, even the Roman engineers famed for their skill and resources, hope to move them? The largest stones at Baalbek far exceed the capacity of cranes, rollers, and manpower known to antiquity. Modern engineers, armed with calculations, machinery, and decades of experience, still struggle to conceptualize the techniques that would be required. And yet these stones were cut, polished, and partially lifted. Some rest at the foundations of the temple complex with staggering precision, their surfaces aligned and joints perfectly tight, betraying a mastery of engineering that seems impossible for the periods historically attributed to them. The problem is compounded by layers of time visible at the site. Archaeologists have identified multiple construction phases, each built atop the last, each leaving traces that speak to different methods, tools, and perhaps different civilizations. The trilithons and massive foundation stones are unmistakably older than the Roman additions. They were quarried, shaped, and positioned long before the Temple of Jupiter arose with its monumental Corinthian columns and decorative flourishes. Examination of the cutting marks and joints reveals techniques that differ significantly from Roman stonework, suggesting a tradition of construction that predates the classical period by thousands of years. These layers of time, stacked one upon another, create a puzzle. What civilization possessed the knowledge, manpower, and organizational capacity to accomplish the first layer of monumental work, and why was it lost to history? Dating adds another layer of mystery. Evidence of human presence in the region stretches back over 11,000 years, and some researchers propose that the megalithic foundation of Baalbek may originate in the very earliest stages of civilization. This would place the engineering of the largest stones far earlier than any recorded complex society, challenging the conventional timeline of human technological advancement. If these early builders existed, they left almost no record, no inscriptions, and no artifacts that clearly identify them. The stones themselves are their monument and their enigma. They speak of knowledge that could not have been developed casually, knowledge of geometry, leverage, and load distribution that seems at odds with our assumptions about prehistoric societies. Each layer of construction, each massive block, raises the possibility of a civilization far older and more advanced than history currently acknowledges. The site's alignment amplifies the mystery. Baalbek's complex does not merely occupy space randomly, it is oriented with a subtle, deliberate precision. Measured against other ancient monuments, including the Great Pyramid of Giza, correlations emerge. Baalbek lies 5 degrees east and 4 degrees north of Giza, a relationship that some researchers suggest could indicate a form of ancient surveying, mapping, or symbolic alignment. This introduces the possibility that the builders were not acting in isolation, but were aware of distant sites, or at least participating in a tradition that valued astronomical and geographic correspondence. Across the world, other megalithic sites from Egypt to Jerusalem display similar attention to celestial and terrestrial markers. Could Baalbek have been part of a broader network of sacred or technical knowledge, a node in a chain of monumental construction that spanned continents? Beyond technical considerations, philosophical questions arise. If a civilization capable of moving, cutting, and precisely positioning stones heavier than anything. The Romans could lift once existed. How was their knowledge lost? How could such feats, evident in the stones themselves, vanish from the historical record entirely? The lack of documentation challenges our understanding of how human knowledge accumulates, persists, and sometimes disappears. We tend to assume that monumental achievement leaves traces in writing, art, or oral tradition. Yet at Baalbek, the silence is deafening. The absence of records, combined with the scale of the work, forces us to consider scenarios outside conventional history. Perhaps the knowledge was deliberately lost, perhaps it decayed through successive societal collapses, or perhaps it was preserved only in methods that could not survive the passage of time. Then there is the question of the stones that remain in the quarries. The stone of the pregnant woman, weighing roughly 1,000 tons, and the 1,650-ton monolith left unfinished, defy rational explanation. If they were intended for the temple complex, why were they never moved? Their abandonment suggests limits that even the builders could not overcome, or perhaps decisions that were intentional, symbolic, or ritualistic. To see these stones lying where they were quarried, half-buried and weathered by millennia of exposure, is to confront the tangible evidence of human ambition halted. They are reminders of both capability and restraint, an enigma frozen in time that dares modern viewers to imagine the effort, the planning, and the knowledge that would have been required. Baalbek forces us to confront the intersection of science and mystery. Engineering models can simulate potential techniques for cutting, lifting, and positioning the stones, yet none fully resolve the questions raised by the sheer size of the megaliths. Archaeological studies illuminate methods and materials, but leave gaps where human ingenuity or lost technologies might have played a role. The more we learn, the more profound the questions become. Every excavation, every measurement, and every study exposes another layer of complexity. Precision that seems impossible, alignments that defy coincidence, and the absence of historical records challenge the boundaries of what we believe humans could achieve in prehistory. At the same time, Baalbek invites philosophical reflection. It reminds us that the past may hold knowledge that exceeds current comprehension. Civilizations rise and fall, and with them, entire bodies of practical and theoretical understanding can vanish. The stones themselves, enduring through earthquakes, weather, and human activity, preserve fragments of that knowledge in a form that defies erasure. They confront us with the possibility that the story of human development is not linear, that ingenuity does not always accumulate in a continuous chain, and that what we consider extraordinary may have been commonplace to a society we have lost. As we study Baalbek, we are drawn to the tension between what we can calculate and what we cannot explain. The quarry stones, the foundation layers, the alignment with distant monuments, all point to an intelligence that was deliberate, precise, and far-reaching. And yet, the record is incomplete, tantalizing, and frustrating. The largest stones remain where they were quarried, untouched for thousands of years, as if waiting for understanding. They are a challenge, a puzzle, and a reminder that the human story may be deeper, older, and stranger than the documents of history allow us to see. Some stones, massive and immovable, lie in the shadow of the temple complex, their surfaces weathered but their presence monumental. They suggest a narrative that we cannot fully access, a story of human, or perhaps unknown, endeavor that predates recorded history. We are left to consider what knowledge was possessed, what methods were employed, and what cultural or spiritual imperatives guided the builders. The questions raised by these monoliths extend beyond engineering. They touch on human imagination, ambition, and the enduring mystery of what is possible. Baalbek, in all its silent grandeur, remains a testament to the unsolved questions of antiquity. The stones that lie in the quarries, heavier than any ever lifted, remind us that the past is not always linear or comprehensible. Construction phases layered with precision, alignments that echo other ancient sites, and prehistoric origins all converge to create a puzzle that is as profound as it is unyielding. Perhaps we are not yet equipped to answer these questions fully. Perhaps some knowledge has been lost forever, leaving only the stones to speak. And yet, in their stillness, in their scale, and in their quiet defiance of understanding, they invite us to look, measure, hypothesize, and imagine. They remain where? They were quarried, as if waiting for us to discover why, daring us to confront the limits of history, science, and human ambition. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey through the universe on frontiers of infinity. If this glimpse into the unknown has sparked your curiosity, be sure to subscribe and join us, where we unravel the darkest mysteries of space.